We're talking today with Saqib Mehmood, who is with the Reckitt Benckiser Group. Give us a sense of the scale of this company.
We operate in about 60 plus countries. We've got manufacturing in a lot of strategic locations, and we operate with close to about, I think, more than 15 global brands.
When you talk about proprietary infrastructure of the past, what are you referring to?
As the IT roles are changing, you require to squeeze more out of your infrastructure so that you can spend more on innovation. Why is it that I can buy 200 gigabytes of space in a click of a button as a consumer, but I still spend 6 months trying to do that when I am trying to do it with internal IT processes?
How does that affect your internal IT operation?
We today run our core BI for all the sales, marketing, and most of the financial performance systems, which is run on cloud. And when we started this discussion, everyone was laughing at us to say that we're going to take our core BI, which with gigabytes and terabytes of data every day being moved around, and this is now a norm. And we have taken that journey 8 years ago, which seemed a bit out of the box, but at this point in time, you see most of the companies operating their BI on the cloud. And I think these are some of the trends which will follow. And if we are trying to build all of these things internally, like local BI systems, etc., we will never be able to get the right resourcing which comes with it. And at the same time, I think technical resources will really be, high quality of technical resources will really be competing with all these big companies who are operating in this space. We would rather like to operate in the space where you get great quality of resources which are business facing, frontline focused, trying to solve problems of businesses rather than building technology.
Where does the impact on your business lie from this, from making this kind of change?
You have to have your business also engaged on this journey, because the fact of the matter is it is 90% change management, 10% technology when you want to go on a journey like this.
Tell us about that change management you're describing.
We made a massive change, even the way that I wanted the role to be positioned. We changed the name of IT to Business Solutions and Insights. It wasn't about just delivering technology, it was first delivering the right business solutions, followed by insights, which are then powered by the right technology platforms. And it took a lot of time for the business teams to understand that we are not order takers. We become more order shapers. So when someone tells me I need something, the first question you ask, so what problem will you try to solve? What are you really trying to achieve out of this? And that's a very different conversation for a lot of the business teams. And every CEO will tell you that he wants the IT organization to be a value driver, but that requires a completely different mindset of how you are structured, how you operate. So last year we made a big play. We made a big play to say we will rename ourselves. We made a big play in terms of saying that 80% of our time will really be spent on transformation agenda rather than the running agenda. And we will start to use the cloud as one of our biggest enablers to take the 80% of focus on actually running the business to 20% and start moving a lot of the focus there to move these things on the cloud.
The journey to consumable cloud services is only partially about the cloud and the technology, but very significantly about the organization's, IT organization's positioning, relationship to the business, internal culture, talent management, and a host of other business issues as opposed to technology issues.
It's easier said than done, because that requires a massive change of your organization. It requires a completely different mindset. And then for you to be able to prove to the business that you can actually play in this space, because this is not a space which is given to you. This is a space which you earn, and it is only earned based on you being able to drive the business in that direction. So what we did a couple of years ago when we started to frame the whole agenda is like we said, we didn't start by saying we want to hire data scientists or we want to take over everything that is done in analytics. We started with a very clear agenda to say what problems that exist in the business today that if I can solve, I can help you to transform. And it's actually interesting when you ask that question to the business, it's not an easy one for them to answer either. So you ask the supply chain team, what can I help you to solve? And you come back with a list of 600 things that you can do. And what you realize is most of it is not really problems, it's just symptoms. And then to take the organization through to say, okay, you've given me 600, why do you need them? What really helps you to transform? To come out with 6, in our case, we came out with 6 transformational agendas, which we thought would help in terms of transforming our function as well as our company, which was in the area of supply chain, which was driving more predictability in our supply chain, which was in the area of sales, on how you could actually make a sales employee life better by giving them all the stuff that they do today through manual computations, etc., but making their decision-making power more enhanced. We started talking about with our consumer teams on how we can use data as an insight of the innovation process in the whole marketing and targeting and hyper-marketing process. So it required us to be very sharp by taking 800, 900 of those things and then making them into very concrete areas which are digestible, but at the same time exciting enough for someone to say that if you really intervene in this space, wow, you can help me to transform.
I know one of the areas that's important to you is pricing and promotions. What is it? Why is it complex? And then we'll talk about what you've done.
We are a FMCG company. We operate through Walmarts and Targets of the world. And for us to be on that shelf clutter, for us to be noticed and for consumers to pick us up, you have to have the right pricing, the right promotion, the right packaging. It's the 4 Ps, right? The 4 Ps really play, once you've got a superior product, you have to win on shelf with all the clutter which is on there. And that's the biggest challenge that a CPG company has. How do you become relevant on the shelf that when a consumer is passing by, they pick you up? And our teams, of course, then spend a load amount of time making sure that it's not just the packaging or the superior product that we have, but what price point do we put it at? What's the promotion that will work? And it's easier said than done. We've got thousands of SKUs. When you're negotiating with the buyer, you're working on the category level. There's sometimes when the buyer is not agreeing to some stuff because he wants to make margin on it. It's a very complex world.
How much data are we talking about and the types of data sources that you look at?
It's many. You have your own internal sales data, which I think is a starting point. You have the data coming from what we call the scan or point of sale data, which comes from our retailers, and we use that as an input. Nielsen is providing a lot of information for us also in terms of what's working, just not for us, but also for the competition, pricing points, etc. We also use a lot of the Amazon data because we do have a significant business online to see how we are performing versus competition ourselves, what pricing points work, what coupons work. And then, of course, our supply and inventory data. All of this is terabytes and terabytes of complex data, which if you were to give it to a normal individual and say, now you use all of this and try to find your way out, good luck.
Presumably, they're not taking terabytes of data from all of these sources, putting it in Excel and crunching a few spreadsheets. So how do you do it?
We started engaging with a company called Aera. Aera came with a very exciting proposition for us because usually what happens with most of the companies when you start to work with them is the systems which are around are really focused on transactions. I think if you look around SAP, most of the systems which are there for Salesforce automation, for promotion management, they're really focused on process. And this is how systems were in the past designed. They were designed for process compliance, not for being smart. And I think that is one area where we started working with a company called Aera, which doesn't make these systems redundant, but starts to come on top of them and starts to make these systems more smarter.
What does that mean, smarter? Smarter systems?
If you are able to take all this transaction data, all these gigabytes of data that we talked about in different systems, if you are able to pull this through, if you are able to create a network around these different data sets and make some meaning out of them, and then on top of this, if you are able to use data science and smart algorithms which are able to do this computation, which is not possible for a human being, going through 36,000 different combinations that can get you the best pricing point that you feel that will make you win, is what Aera does for us. So Aera takes all these desperate pieces of data which we have, bring it together, put some logic around it to clean it, put some algorithms that work on top of this, and then it becomes a far more smarter output that can be used for our key account managers to start making some decisions rather than try to figure out what data works and what doesn't.
How is this any different from traditional data processing? So I'm trying to drill in on the cognitive aspect.
Because you have all these systems which have their own data sets, they all have their own master data, they have their own connections. Trying to put all of this in one place has always been a mess. It's not always easy to take 15 systems which have their own master data definitions and then trying to link them up as one holistic view. And I think this is where Aera really helps us, is to create a cognitive data map. And once you've been able to do a cognitive data map, you are able to look at data all the way from your storefront all the way to the supply chain. This is huge power which you can't do when you have data lying in 15 different systems. Then on top of this, adding smarter algorithms that can go across this whole piece of data maps which are there, and then being able to find for you the nuggets of information is not just pure computation, because I think it's also, apart from computation, is also about the machine learning that comes with it. It learns every time. As users start to accept something, it starts to make it more and more powerful in the system in terms of maps. If it starts to see that users are rejecting some recommendation, it tries to find out why and take them through the elimination process. I think the biggest benefit which I see, it's not about computation, it's about creating a brain within the company which used to be all in employees, and then when someone leaves, it leaves with all that proprietary information. So it takes you three years to get a key account manager really understanding some of the stuff, how these things work, and then when they leave with all this data and knowledge with them. I think being able to preserve the different data elements, how each promotions work, trying to make a map out of this, and then being able to preserve it every time someone makes a decision on top of it, is actually super powerful, because the new guy who comes into the job can pick it up from where the last guy left it. And this is, for us, it's not about just being smarter decisions, it's about retaining the knowledge within the company as well.
So the combination of data, algorithms, and then the maps, as you were just describing, in a way is serving this corporate knowledge retention function.
Exactly. And that's why it becomes a far more stronger proposition, is how do you retain brain power within the business? And you really make this as one of your critical brains. It should work much smarter than any other CAM. And then the CAMs can focus more on relationships. They can focus on more negotiation power rather than spending hours trying to compute what is the right pricing point and what's the promotion I should be running. They should be more focused on how they can drive business from a top line perspective using these as tactics rather than figuring out what the tactics works and what don't work.
So the results are given to them, and so they don't have to basically spend most of their time in huge Excel spreadsheets, I guess.
Right, and like we said, this is a change management, because the first time you give someone some results, they say, well, I can always do this better than you because I don't trust the machine doing this for me. And I think it's a change management. 10% is really what I talked about. it's very powerful, but this is 10% in an organization. 90% is really change management. It's about sitting down with these people, taking them through this process, making them feel on why their job can become far more strategic and important, rather than trying to crunch some of this stuff which we can do for you in a far better way. The analogy I give most of the time to my teams is, you never get up in the morning and you say, I'm going to forecast the weather. You have weather forecasting systems that do the weather forecast. You plan around it. So if it's raining, you take an umbrella. And this is what the function of the business should be. They should not be doing things which can be done better, faster, efficient in terms of predictability, like forecast, like promotions that will run. They should plan around them. So once you know what's going to happen, you plan your tactics around it. It's a far more better, forward-looking way of operating a business than trying to spend a lot of time predicting what machines can do fast better.
I know forecasting for many companies is another very complex area. So maybe just share some insight about that with us.
For forecasting, also we use the same company, which is called Aera. And before we talk about forecasting, it's not about forecasting, it's about bringing predictability in the business. Because guess what happens? Because one wrong decision which is made 5 weeks ago can have multiple ripple effects when it's actually in action. So if a customer places an order today, had I been able to predict that much better 5 weeks ago, I would have been able to get the raw materials in time, get it produced on time, shipped it to the warehouse. So that time dimension is actually the value. The value is, that's what changes companies from being able to, the lesser that time becomes, the more challenging it is. If you have 3 days to actually do it when an order has come in, you actually start to create a huge ripple effect in your company. You start panic, by which you start going back, and then you start changing your things in your supply chain, in your manufacturing, and then it just becomes a havoc. And the more people touch this at the last moment in time, it just becomes a continuous web of a lot of mistakes that the lower end of the stream is handling, which is really your supply chain. By just bringing more predictability in your value chain, you can eliminate a lot of these things. And that's where we started from. What is the purpose that we are really trying to solve? We wanted to make sure that we can, with 5 weeks in advance, have a better predictability on our products, and then use this as a driving point for what really needed to be changed at a macro level. So if we knew that a customer operates in a certain way, and the second week of the month, I will get maybe an unplanned order because this happened 3 months ago, and the 3 months ago because he does some inventory changes in his system, and hence some events get triggered by this, I can use this now to start planning much better.
And very briefly, what are the data sources? The kinds. Give us a sense of, as you did with trades and promotions, what are the kinds of data that feed into this?
90% of the data sources are the same which you use for promotions, because at the end of the day, sales data and promotion data, most of them use the same. You have financials, inventory, you have what's your raw materials in the factory. You're taking most of the data coming out of your ERP, then you take the scan. We use a lot of data from Nielsen. We use a lot of data which is coming through third-party systems like merchandising, OSA, which we feed in. All of this comes in a similar way. We try to make sense out of it, create a cognitive map, and then we let the system run some smart algorithms to start doing the prediction. And you have to train because like we were discussing for the trade promotions, the first time you would give a promotion out, forecasting out to the planners, they would never accept it but then you start saying, okay, I'm going to start competing with you. So you do a forecast and we'll let the system do the forecast, and then let's run it for 3 months and let's see where are we getting better. And then you start getting on the journey, because after some time they start to realize that actually all this time that they spend, they could have done something better. And as you go through this, I think that's the most important point. You have to take people on this journey rather than trying to make them compete versus the system. And this is where most of these change management programs fail, is when you take a lot of these nice fancy gadgets and try to threaten the employees that they might not have a job.
So you engage the employees and help lead them on a path towards greater innovation, which of course they prefer rather than doing these rote tasks.
Exactly. And if for them to be standing in front of their customer teams and being able to show that they are actually doing much better in terms of forecasting, hence service, is a far more encouraging thing for them than to say that I missed out on some things. And since they have 80% more time, because we've really now reached a stage where half the business in US is run without anyone touching it, so it's really the machine that decides what we predict. These teams have more time in terms of taking these peaks and troughs and trying to normalize them, working with customer teams, working with the manufacturing teams, and making sure that they can use their time for more planning rather than forecasting.
Any final thoughts, or can you offer advice to other CIOs who might be listening to this on how to begin this journey?
I think it starts with purpose. What problem are you really trying to solve? Most of the time, you just start embarking on a journey without trying to understand. We are not a tech company. We are a FMCG company. We sell brands, and our problem starts with brands, with customers. When you put this at the core of your problem and trying to really solve problems for customers, for consumers, and for your brands, then it's a very different conversation. Also trying to make sure that you are not an order taker within the business. You might be appreciated short term for just taking an order and then executing it, but this is not where a value added long-term role or relationship or respect can develop. So initially means you have to go a bit tough. A lot of people will come to you by putting 50, 100 things into your transformation roadmap and making sure that you can deliver, having tough conversations to really find out what will move the needle and what really drives company purpose and the results is, I think, the starting point.
Saqib, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Saqib Mehmood from RB in the UK. Thanks so much and have a great day.